Hey everybody, this video is about the jobs of the government and it's part of our What is Government unit. I'm going to start with that definition that we've already looked at. What is government? The systems and people who have the authority to rule over an area of land and the people who live there. To break it down, it's the systems and people, so the organizations, the groups, the people who have the authority or the ability to rule over an area of land and the people who live there. So, for example, the United States government has the authority to rule over the area of land that is the United States, but they don't have the authority to rule over, say, Canada or something in South America. Another way of putting this would be to say jurisdiction. A government has jurisdiction over an area of land, and we'll talk more about these terms as we continue. So there are 6 jobs of the government that it's important for us to look at today. One job of the government is to defend the nation. Another is to protect our rights. To provide public services is the third one. Next, to settle disputes, to make laws to create safety and order, and the final one is to make plans to address issues. These are our 6 jobs of the government that we're going to take a closer look at today. So we are going to be filling in this chart on your note sheet. Go ahead and find this chart now if you haven't already. During this video, anytime you see a blue circle, that means it's something that you need to write on the note sheet. We're going to start with the job, the government defends the nation. The government pays for and organizes the military, which is how they defend the people, the locations, the buildings, the cities, the towns, the governments in our nation, in our country. There are a lot of military services, including the Coast Guard, the Marines, the Navy Reserve, the Army Reserve. Each of these is part of the military that the government uses to defend the nation. At this point, this is what you'll write on the Government Defends the Nation section of your notes. The next one we're going to look at is the government protects our rights and freedoms. And this comes out of the Bill of Rights, those 10 amendments or additions that are written into the Constitution. The first article, the first amendment of the Bill of Rights, talks about the freedoms that we have as people in the United States. These include freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom to petition. We'll take a closer look at each of these freedoms and how the government protects them later in the year, but for right now it's important to know that it is the government's job to protect each of these freedoms and the rights that we'll look at later in the year. At this point, write these in the Government Protects Our Rights and Freedoms section of your notes. Next, we're going to go on to the government provides public services. A public service, this is a vocab word, is a useful, that says survive, but it should say service, that the government provides to the people. Some examples include maintaining and building roads. So anytime there's a pothole in a road, it is the government's job, whether it's state or national, to fix that pothole and keep the road safe for us. They also provide schools. They fund schools, build schools, find teachers for schools, pay for school buses for schools. Another public service would be police and fire, so that they can help people who are in distress or in need. They also provide public transportation. That includes school buses, city buses, trains, any public transportation. And finally, some museums are public services that the government will pay for and provide for the public. At this point, jot down these public services on your note sheet. Next, we're going to look at the government settles disputes between people. A dispute is a disagreement or an argument. And the way that they do this is by setting up courts to help settle disputes or disagreements. So one example is the Supreme Court, but there are lots of courts within our court system that we'll take a look at this year. For right now, it's important to know that it's the government's job to settle disputes between people in those courts that it sets up. Go ahead and write that in your Government Settles Disputes Between People section of your notes. Next, we're going to look at the government makes laws to create safety and order. Laws are designed to keep people safe and maintain order in the community. Some examples of these laws that they create are things like speed limits, food inspection, and water quality standards. So the quality of your water, the chemical makeup of it, what is allowed in the water and not allowed in the water, those are things that the government researches and decides and makes the people who provide water abide by. Also, car safety, things like having working headlights, having seatbelts in the car, having windshield wipers. That is something that the government has made a law about that Ford and other car makers are required to follow to ensure that we are safe when we're in a car. And then fire drills in schools is another example of a law. We are required to practice fire drills in schools. That is a law, and it's designed to make sure that if there was an event of a real fire, we would be kept safe. These are just some of the laws that the government would work on in order to create that safety and order within our community. Go ahead and jot these down in your Government Makes Laws to Create Safety and Order section of your notes. The last job we'll look at today is the government makes plans to address issues. So procedures for dealing with fires, crime, and terrorism are some of the issues that the government makes plans to take care of and address. These are also known as public policy, one of our vocab words for this unit. So if there were a wildfire, say out in the West, out in California, there's a big wildfire, the government would use its resources to try to address that issue and resolve it, put out that wildfire, make sure everybody is safe, get as many people out as we can. Another example would be like the aftermath of an event like 9/11, when we had to address this act of terrorism against our country. The government's job was to create public policy to help address that issue. Public policy is the government's response to an issue. So how the government responds to something like a wildfire or a terrorist attack or crime or something like that. At this point, write this in your Government Makes Plans to Address Issues section of your notes. We're going to take a final look at what should be in your note sheet. While we're going over this, just take a look at your notes and make sure you have the right information in the right places. The government pays for and organizes the military. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to petition. Roads, schools, police, fire, public transportation, and museums as examples of public services. The government sets up courts to help settle disputes or disagreements. We have these examples of laws that are created to help with safety and order. And then procedures for dealing with fires, crime, terrorism, also known as public policy. At this point, if your notes sheet is completed, you are good to leave this video. Nice job.